Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is C2C Riley Murray. It's my privilege to welcome you to this session of the 24th Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium, made possible by our flagship supporter, the Class of 73, the Association of Graduates, the USAFA Endowment, and many generous sponsors. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator for this afternoon's panel, Mr. Wayne Hagan. Mr. Wayne Hagan is an award-winning sports broadcaster who's been broadcasting in the Major League Baseball League for over 28 years, including SportsCenter's second ever broadcast. He was the voice of the Rockies for the first 10 years of their baseball program, and he has broadcasted for programs like the Golden State Warriors, Colorado State football, ESPN college basketball, and pre- and post-game shows for the San Francisco 49ers. He has also launched school programs, including Hagan's Heroes and Fields of Opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Wayne Hagan.
Thank you very much. How's everybody doing? You know what we need to do? I did baseball for 28 years. Middle of the seventh inning, we always stood. So let's stand. Let's have a seventh inning stretch. Let's just do something different, okay? Okay, one guy's singing. He's a Cubs fan. Hey, maybe in another 108 years. No, I'm kidding. They were great. They beat a great Cleveland team, too. Okay, you can be seated, and let's do some introductions, and let's have some fun. What I'd like to ask you by hands, would you like to ask some questions today, please? Good, because I want to do that today. I didn't offer that opportunity last night when we launched all of this because we were having so much fun on the stage, we forgot to ask questions of the audience. So I'm going to do that today, I promise you. Okay, a couple of the people that I want to bring up, I've already had a chance to meet and I already admire. And I don't admire easily, but the people and what they do and what they have done with their careers is just amazing to me. So the first person on our athletic panel that I'd like to bring up is a marathon and ultra runner. She actually ran in the Leadman Ultra Series, and she set the female record for that. She beat the record by 3 hours. Now, how fast can this woman run? Would you please have an Air Force Academy welcome for Stephanie Wirtz? This is the first opportunity I've had to talk to this gentleman. I've heard so much about him, and the nickname Gizzy kind of does it for me. He's an interesting guy. I can't wait to hear his story. You know him as being an All-American linebacker from the Air Force Academy, was with the Denver Broncos, the Green Bay Packers, in fact, with the strength and conditioning of the Green Bay Packers. That includes Aaron Rodgers, who had a fabulous second half, and simply because of Chris Gizzy telling him what to do and him being obedient and doing it. I would love very much to talk to him about his career, and he's got some insight into the NFL and how it deals with you, the audience, today. So, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Chris Gizzy. We have a gentleman who had his life changed almost miraculously by a visit to a foreign country. You'll hear that story today. He was a member of the University of Florida Gators who won the championship of college football. In fact, whenever anybody talks about the jump pass by Tim Tebow, you have to remember that there was a guy who caught that pass. Ladies and gentlemen, a guy who was in the NFL and has a spectacular story to tell today, David Nelson. David? And I will tell you, we have a little bit of news that Jordan Burroughs, the Olympic wrestler, was supposed to be here. He is en route to the Air Force Academy, but we don't know when he's going to be here. He is MIA. at the moment. The weather has affected his flight, so we apologize for that, and so does he, but he's going to make it up to you as he gets here for what we love, the National Character and Leadership Symposium. So he is coming. He just won't be a part of this, but I tell you, these people don't have to take a second seat to anybody. They have fabulous stories. So I'd love to start off with Stephanie, because I don't understand how a person can run 100 miles in one race, let alone in a lifetime. You started at 10,000 feet, not too far from good old Pikes Peak, and you were numero uno coming across that finish line. Was there ever a time you wanted to quit?
Wow, is this on? Okay. Thank you for setting that up so nicely for me. You know, I think the thought of running 100 miles, even for a runner who does marathons, and up to that point I had run 50 miles at my longest distance, it was absolutely daunting. And, you know, really what I learned over the course of that journey was I couldn't always be thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm running 100 miles. I had to literally take it step by step and hour by hour. And it was really an opportunity as a runner to explore that limit and see if I could actually survive for 100 miles, being on my feet for 23 hours and 20 minutes and without stopping. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And there were certainly times when I definitely wanted to stop and I wanted to lay down. I wanted to, you know, yell at my poor husband who ran with me for about 40 miles, carrying my water and my food and my flashlight. But again, it's one of those things in running and in athletic pursuits, you have no idea what you can actually do unless you make an attempt. And I have had plenty of other attempts where I have not succeeded. And you know, you learn from those and you take those lessons and you apply them to the next challenge. And so it was a huge, really blessing to me to finish and come across the finish line and have it all go better than I had hoped. So yeah, it was quite a challenge.
Stephanie, I got to tell you, you have a gifted athlete 2 chairs over from you, a gazelle. I mean, just athletically, he just looks like he should be carved out of the Roman Empire. And you're talking about running 100 miles, and you should have seen what he was doing. Oh, no, oh, no, oh, no. He's not going to run. If we could let David have the microphone, I would love to know what it was like to hear her story of running 100 miles. And she's run so many races. She's won so many races. You're an athlete. You played football. What in the world was she thinking about running so far?
It doesn't sound like she was thinking, but and I actually got to apologize to you because we spoke on the panel last night together, and I had heard, you know, I briefly was getting everybody's introduction, and you know, I was a Brian Greasy fan when I grew up, and I was sitting next to him, and so I spent most of my time talking to Brian, and I had heard that they'd mentioned that you ran 100 miles, and so in my football player mind, it's like, oh, well, like over a 5-day period or over a month, and didn't occur to me that you actually ran 100 miles and didn't think that was physically possible. My fiance can attest, I can't even drive 100 miles without stopping at a gas station a few times. And so I am a sprinter. A gazelle was a nice way to put it. I run fast in short distance. My fiance and my mom, some of the people ran in the New York City Marathon this year, which is 26.2 miles. My Fitbit said that I walked that day about a half marathon, and so that is as far as I can get. But I love what you said about you never know what you can accomplish until you try. And that's, it's a powerful statement. And that's something that I pretty much know I could never run 24, 26, not even 100 miles. I can't even stand on my feet for 24 hours. But it's amazing, and it's just the will to be able to overcome and to be able to give herself the opportunity and not give up before she even started.
Chris Gizzi, as a strength and conditioning coach with the Green Bay Packers, I would imagine there are a couple of the players that got you a little angry at times. You'd like to see them run 100 miles.
I tell you what, we are going to set up some off-season conditioning with Team Stephanie. I think it'll put a good dent in guys. It's one thing to run a race, to run to win is a different level, and I think that's for anyone who's run a marathon, a 10K, any race, to compete and do your best. But then to do your best and beat others, I think that's stroking and smoking the fire that we're liking, and we're getting going with this thing. So a good way to start off. I'm excited. I'm going to start taking up some jogging. Even, I'm not the gazelle. I'm kind of the guy that wants to get you in between the rocks, get you in a phone booth. But I'm motivated. We've got a good group.
I did this last night, and Chris wasn't present for it, but I was giving a draft report that was written on a particular player. So I'm going to play this with you because I did it with David and Brian Greasy last night. So if you were to receive a report, which you do as one of the coaching staff, you receive this draft report that this guy can't throw a tight spiral, can't throw downfield, he's impeccably slow, not just in running, a 5.2 40, but he also just couldn't move the ball down the field. And everything he did, from taking the snap and drifting back and setting and throwing, was slow. And yet, I always say you can't measure a person's heart. And that person just happened to be Tom Brady, a 5-time Super Bowl champion, who, by the way, and I think David would really appreciate this as well as Chris and Stephanie, you take away a year where he had a knee injury. So let's say he played 15 years as the starting quarterback for New England, and 7 times you go to the Super Bowl. I mean, arguably, and I'd love to have an argument, not with you guys, too big, but arguably the greatest quarterback that ever played. Nobody could boast about that. So, Chris, tell us about Tom Brady from your perspective. What makes this guy the Super Bowl champion that he is?
So many things. To get back to your point, the intangibles sometimes aren't highlighted on ESPN, kind of where we get our information, or at least the fan base gets information, I think, as you're around the game. And I think as people tap into their knowledge as a combatant, a warrior, a pilot, what this room is born and bred and been trained to do, you start realizing those things which make another performer great, because you can recognize it in your own class. You can see it amongst other pilots. There's a, I use the word odor, not to even make a joke, but it's something that's, you don't feel it the way you'd normally. You don't see it necessarily with your eyes. You don't hear it, but it's, there's a funk to a guy. You've been on the field against that team before. I'm sure you can attest. That team has a funk to it, and the funkiest of the bunch is number 12. Like, he's got something special to him. I love, I was ending my career playing when he was just starting. You love to play against guys like that because they bring the best out in you. Now, you never want to be on the other end of a game, but at the same time, it's what the beauty of pro football, or even any pro endeavor, is to go after and compete on a world stage and try to be the best.
One of the things that bothered me doing 28 years of Major League Baseball is I saw guys who should have been better than they were. For whatever reason, they didn't train right, they didn't care. There's some people in this room that obviously know the Mickey Mantle story, where he always said, if I had known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. He always thought he was going to die an early death because his father did. So he was a baseball player, a magnificent baseball player that hit 536 home runs and is in the Hall of Fame. But we all know that he probably could have been even better. So I'm going to ask Stephanie, when you run against people, has there ever been a time where you said, that person physically should be really good, but I will beat their buns?
I love when that happens. But, I think I know I have a few times heard the story of the person who says they want to run a marathon someday, and their friends are out training for like 6 months, and they decide the weekend before, you know what, I am going to go out, I'm going to run the marathon, and they haven't done the training. And they do it, and they have a respectable time, and you're just thinking, do you know how fast you could be if you had trained? And I think there's a lot of potential out there, untapped potential, for people when they don't try and push themselves and try and dig a little bit deeper and see what they can really do. I think the revenge on those people is usually they're in way more pain the following days and weeks than the people who did train, which is, kind of a little bit of a consolation. But I think, when you're starting a race and you've spent hours and hours putting your training, you want to go out there and you want to show what you have, and you want to bring your competitors up to that same level with you, regardless of the sport that you're competing in, and the hope is that those hours of time you've committed to achieving this goal will pay off when you're actually at the course and you're fighting for the finish line. So I think it's added motivation for me when I see someone or hear a story of someone who claims that they haven't been putting in the miles that I have. And I think that's a little extra motivation to try a little bit harder.
One of the things that these three have experienced, whether they heard it or not, was somebody being critical of them, telling them that they can't do certain things. Sometimes we can use that as ammunition to make us want to go do it. Sometimes we read it, sometimes, as I said, it's said by people behind their backs. It's all part of life. And one of the things I've learned in athletics is that they have never erected a statue to a critic. Do you ever notice that? Never in front of a stadium is there a statue to a critic. That person condemned everybody and said they couldn't be anything. So I look at David Nelson and I say to myself, and I will ask as a question today, what motivated you when somebody criticized you?
Well, I mean, it's a great question because it happens almost every day. And it's something that, if I'm being totally honest, if I'm being totally transparent, that I still have to battle with. I still have to check myself, especially now as I step out of the NFL and transitioning into a new career. And there's those doubters. There's people saying that I can't do it or I won't succeed, and people that want to see me fail. And all I can do is go back to the times to where I know I've done it before. I know I've been able to accomplish it. And like she was saying, my edge and what sets me apart is that I'm not the most physically gifted and the most talented person, but I know that I've already beat you because I've prepared. And I know that I did everything I possibly can do, and I controlled everything that was in my control to be able to do that. And it also helps that my biggest motivation is people who tell me I can't. I love to be able to prove you wrong. I love to be able to, even if I don't directly do it, walk in and say, ha, you were wrong. Because it's not necessarily that I believe in myself, but I love a challenge. I love when somebody says, we're playing a game and they want me to do something and I don't want to do it, all they got to say is, I bet you can't, and I'm going to do it. Because I just want to prove that I can't. And like she was saying, that in a lot of ways when they say those things, I don't even really know if I can or I can't. But I at least want to give myself the opportunity to succeed. And if I fail giving it everything that I had. And I can rest my head in the pillow at the end of the day knowing that I gave it all I had. And it just wasn't in the cards for me. And I can honestly say I can never run 100 miles, but I haven't given myself the chance to. And so I'm limiting my options, my opportunities. And a guy that I learned that from was Timmy. And as much as people praise him and tell him all the good things that he's done, that guy still is motivated by something somebody said to him in the 5th grade about how he couldn't do something, he wouldn't be the starting quarterback in the NFL, and it continues to motivate him to this day. And so people always say, what's the bigger factor, the euphorium of winning or the difficulty of losing? And for me, it's neither. It's being able to tell somebody that I did whenever they say I couldn't, and because I can control the things that I can control. And at the end of the day, that's all I can do.
I don't think I've ever known an athlete more criticized than Tim Tebow, for whatever reason. Would you agree? I
mean, the guy just takes his shirts off and runs around the field, and people criticize him, and he's got a rough life, doesn't he? But he's one of those people that if every single one of these people tell him that he did a great job, but there's one that says he didn't, then he feels like he didn't do his job. And he feels like he's out, and he's going to remember your face, he's going to remember your name, he's going to remember your mother's name, your dad's name, and he's going to go and he's going to have that, he's going to hang your picture in his locker, and it's going to drive him, it's going to motivate him, because somebody said that he couldn't, and he knows in his mind that he can, or if he can't, he's going to find a way to. And that's something to be said about people who refuse to settle, refuse to let other people put them in a box, let other people determine and dictate their destiny or their worth.
In Major League Baseball, it's not like 16 games. Then you have the 4 preseason games, so a total of 20 in the NFL. The NBA plays 82 games. We played 162, plus 6 weeks of spring training. I think it's way too many baseball games, to be honest with you. And it just amazed me what an endurance test it was. But the other factor that I'm going to direct to Chris is that in baseball, if you won 100 games, that was a rarity. But you were considered a great baseball team. Not good, you were great. just remember that that means you walked away a loser 62 times that spring and summer. That's a lot of losing. So what I had to see in baseball is how those who lost accepted it. The beauty of baseball is that you got right back into it the next day. The NFL, you have a week usually to prepare for a game. The Atlanta Falcons dismantled the Green Bay Packers. They put on their best show at home in Atlanta to beat Green Bay and go to the Super Bowl, and we all know the story of what happened there. But Chris, when a team loses, take us to the Green Bay locker room and the trip back to Green Bay from Atlanta. What stood out about those who lost, who did it with dignity and class?
Boy, that's the toughest question we got. I get a break the next round, right?
Yeah.
You know what? There's getting on the plane, just to give a general, this was, guys laid it all in the field. They were exhausted. People played hurt, people played injured. It's the nature of the game. It's the beauty of any sport played at a high level. I think what you have is as guys were on the plane, there was a healthy respect for the opponent. There's always guys that you can tell they want to, can you open the weight room when we get in? I mean, that's a silly thing to say, but I see where they're going. You know, they're motivated. I think there's a time there that's really important to sit in that position. Now, however way you take it, some people it might be anger, it might be frustration, it might be sadness, but to sit in the raw emotion of it, don't rush back in to training for the next week. You know, be realistic. We've got a day. It behooves the players to rest their bodies physically. There's a transition period as you kind of get everyone's body ready to go again, but I think that's an important time to sit, and whether it's active, conscious reflection, but I think you got to sit in your own mess a little bit. And I think that is taken, whether you bank that and you use it as a chip on your shoulder. It can be motivation. It can be just embracing what it is to be a performer. The ups and downs, if you can frame them the same, can really be the same thing. It's just something that happened to you. And then you don't develop an attachment to it, up or down. You really get lost in your process. And I think both these two can attest. When you're in that zone, you know, it's gold. You got your best chance of being successful. It's what you're going out there for. But that's what I would, hope guys get and do on the plane right back. Shoot, it's what I tried to sit in myself. What am I going to do to improve the team?
I'm going to stay with you and be easy. One of the lasting memories of the NFL for me after 9/11 was the gentleman in the center here with an American flag. And that made this academy proud. It made America proud. Tell me about that day.
I'd be happy to. It was by far, definitely one of the best memories I've had in my life, if not definitely my sports career. I'll tell the story because the story is pretty fascinating. You guys want to hear the story a little bit? Obviously, we all know what happened. We delayed the games, delayed playing a football game for a week. I remember talking to my commanding officer, Air Force Reserve Command, and I was like, "Hey, what you need? What are we doing? I don't know if I'm getting pulled back up. The team wants to know. I'm proactive with it." I got a great pep talk by this old lieutenant colonel. I mean, his hair was on fire. He didn't have much, just maybe right around the ear, but he was so motivating. And the idea of continuing the mission and taking the opportunity that I had and doing what I could to promote and be a part of what we do as a fighting service. It was an honor for Coach Sherman at the time to elect me to run out with the flag. Well, actually, he just said, "Giz, take the flag out." Now, I wasn't sure if he wanted me to present the colors. My rifle manual was a little rusty. Like I was sweating a little bit because he zapped some folks for some outlandish stuff. Not that I was going to dance like a bird with the flag or anything, but I want to make sure it went right and I did right by Coach. So we talked about it. Everything was going to be smooth. I get out by the tunnel, and this is the old stadium. So this is the tunnel right by the north end zone. If for those of you who don't know the north end zone in Lambeau, this is where in the Ice Bowl, Bart Starr had the quarterback sneak to beat the Cowboys. And, this is sacred ground. Grown men go out there and kiss the ground, rain, sleet, or shine. So there's some momentum building with this. The place is starting to shake a little bit. One of our equipment guys is down there, and he asked me, hey, where's your flag? And I'm, like, pretend I'm patting my uniform, like I must have left it in my away jersey. What do you mean, where's my flag? Like, we don't have a flag here? And like a dart, he runs up the tunnel. I mean, we're talking, there's minutes before this thing's going to go down. He gets one of our other equipment managers who's got a Boy Scout troop who lives within running distance of the stadium, because he wouldn't have been able to drive through the mass of humanity. He sprints and is talking on his cell phone to his wife. Hey, get the flag ready, it's important. The wife's asking questions. He's like, there's no time for explanations now. Get the flag. So he's in the doghouse. I might be in the doghouse. This is mounting up. He runs out, he grabs the flag, he runs back. He definitely ran more than I did that night. I get it in my hand, I turn around, and the response from the crowd. And this is what team sports and any sport is supposed to be. It's a connection to something bigger than yourself. And it's the greatest social common denominator we have. I floated across the field. It was an awesome experience, and I think the feedback I got after that from my brothers and sisters who were serving was it really gave me a lot of wind in my sails. That, like, you know what, this is helping. This is making a difference. I'm able to make the best impact I can. And for me then to hear that same sentiment years later. It's very encouraging. It's very encouraging for what the NFL is for America. It should be something that brings us together, never to drive us apart. Even though we're competing, we should compete as hard, and just like you're competing against your brother or your sister. It brings out the best in you when you go against someone you have respect for.
What a great story. And I will say this, the World Series that year after 9/11, we had missed a week of baseball. And eventually it was the Arizona Diamondbacks, an upstart team in just its third year, against the mighty Yankees. And that's when President George W. Bush went out to throw out the ceremonial first pitch. And I don't know if you know this story, but underneath, away from the eyes of anybody in that stadium, Derek Jeter came over to talk to the president. And he says, Mr. President, I'm just trying to be cool here. Are you going to throw out the ceremonial first pitch? And President Bush says, yes, I am. You are going to throw it from the top of the mound, aren't you, sir? You're not going to throw it from the front, because if you step down from the mound and throw, this is the Bronx, they're going to boo you. And sure enough, he threw a perfect strike from the top of the mound on the rubber, thanks to one Derek Jeter. So I appreciate your story. That was an incredible moment that I won't forget about you. I have two quick questions. Stephanie is just an amazing person. I've talked to her husband, Michael, did it again at lunch today, and she's extremely modest. So she's not one to come up and ballyhoo herself and her achievements and all of that. She's very, 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 I would say humble. And that's the greatest word you can give to an athlete. They're humble, even though they have greatness. I love humble greatness. That's what I think this woman has. And I want to ask her, in closing with her, you said it's not about the finish line, yet every race has a starting point, and the end point is the finish line. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that's a great question. Thank you for saying that. I think running is humbling, and it's out there, you against yourself and you against the elements, and it's can be the great equalizer for any of us. But I think what I learned, and not only just in life in general, but it really was magnified when I did this whole ultra series last year, but that there's certainly a finish line and a goal that you set that you want to achieve, but the most meaningful and the most powerful part comes in the journey, and it comes in taking that time to appreciate the pain when you're in the pain and you're in the suffering and you want to stop, and soaking that in and learning from it. It comes in the memories that you make and the connections you make with the people. We have such an outstanding community here. I live here in Manitou Springs, and the running community here and just in the whole state is unbelievable. The connections and the relationships that you carry and that you build over the course of the journey. And I think that really what I meant was, yes, there's always a finish line, and sometimes the finish line is awesome and you're breaking the tape, and sometimes it's 23 hours and 20 minutes and you want to vomit and you're really uncomfortable. And I think, there are really memorable things about the finish line, but the most important and significant parts of my experience with running have been in the journey and in the process. And I think that's something that I can take from athletics and take it into just about anything, making sure we're not always just looking at that goal way out in front of us, but that we're being present and taking the time to appreciate those moments every day.
Thank you, Stephanie. Final question for me, and we're going to open it up to you folks. So think what you're going to ask. But this goes to David, because David was a national champion in college. He goes to the NFL. He lives a dream. He grew up in Texas. He didn't get to be a Dallas Cowboy at the outset of things, but he played with the Jets and he played with the Steelers. He achieved a great deal. And I would like him to share his story about going to a foreign country, as I alluded to earlier. He went to Haiti. He went with expectations, perhaps, or his mindset on what he was going to do over there, but he came back a totally different person.
Yeah, and you set that up much nicer today than last night. But and it all starts back when I was a kid. And like he said, I grew up in Dallas, and back in the '90s, everybody was doing it. Everybody was a Cowboys fan, and I remember I would go to training camp, and I remember wanting Deion Sanders' autograph or Troy Aikman's autograph, or even just for them to look at me or just to wave or something as they were passing by in their Mercedes-Benz golf carts. But I remember specifically one guy who was a great player but wasn't the most highly publicized guy, a guy by the name of Darren Woodson. Came, and after practice, all the ones I went to, stayed for like an hour after practice, after a crazy hot practice, and and back then it was 2 days, and they had a lot to do, and spent an hour. Everybody who was at the line, online at the fence, he spent time with. And I remember I had a ball, and I just asked, he came over, and I just thought I'd be crazy and say, "Will you just catch my ball?" He said, "Yeah, I'll do one better. How about you come out here?" And for 5 minutes, he just threw the ball with me. And he just asked me what grade I was in, what classes I was in, and he just took time just to spend with me in the busyness of his schedule. And I tell you, that's, to this day, it's the greatest present gift I've ever received from anybody, because he gave me what can't be measured, which is time, and his presence. And so I remember driving home and told my dad, I said, if I ever make it to be a professional athlete or have somebody who has influence, I want to do for people just like Darren Woodson did for me today, because I was on cloud 9. And so when I made it to the NFL after being undrafted and having a good year in my second year, I started to, wanting to look for ways to be able to, I guess, if I'm being totally honest, increase my brand, to strengthen my brand. At that time, the NFL was going through a bit of a black eye. It was during the whole Baltimore Ravens situation and the Adrian Peterson situation, and so thought I could really help boost the NFL's brand by doing something good. And so the opportunity was presented to go to Haiti and just do some service. And I had never been to Haiti. I'd never been to a country like that. But I stepped into it, like you said, with expectations that I was going to get more Twitter followers, expectations that people were going to have this perception of me, expectations that I was going to accomplish something. The finish line for me was, I'm going to save 2,500 lives this week. And so that was what I was going to do, and I had set those goals, and it was either mission completed, mission success, or mission failed. And I went there, and just long story short, ended up meeting a little boy who hadn't eaten in a few days, and I walked over to him. He was caught on some rebar, which was pretty consistent because these kids were so lethargic, and after the earthquake, they just were running around. They get caught, and they couldn't take themselves off. And I took him off of the rebar, and I had Cliff Bar and some bubbles, and I asked him if he wanted anything to eat, and he said no. I said, well, do you want to play? And he said, no. I said, well, what do you want? And he looked up at me and put his hands in the air, and in plain English just simply said, hold me. And it brought me back to the beginning. It brought me back to why I wanted to be a professional athlete. Above the touchdown catches and the fame and the money, it was because somebody who could do anything they wanted with their life and had the opportunities and availability to literally do anything chose to spend time with me. And in that world, I was all that mattered. I mattered to him, my idol, whatever it may be. And in this little boy's situation, didn't know if he was going to eat or where he was going to eat or sleep that night, didn't know if he was going to live or die the next day. But in that moment, all he wanted was to be known. And I didn't get my phone out and take a selfie. I wanted to experience those 5 minutes and get back to what originally got me inspired to do these things. And, it got to a point just like, he was saying, I thought, well, I want to quit the NFL and just move to Haiti. I want to go and serve these kids and love these kids and be able to do I'm ready to go. That's my calling, then I want to do that. And a pastor of mine who was my mentor actually challenged me and said, what if you can do more for Haiti by not actually being there? What if that's actually the easy way and you can actually do more with your influence? And because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and be there on the front line and experience that every single day. I didn't want to have to go to training camp and do all that kind of stuff anymore. And it was an eye-opening experience for me to be able to realize and to see, like she was saying, the journey, and to walk forward with expectancy, not necessarily expectations, expectancy that my life is going to be changed in some way, expectancy that I'm going to learn something today, expectancy that I'm going to spend time with people because they may have something that will benefit and contribute to my life and ultimately my goals in life. And at the end of the day, it was all about the journey. It was about spending time with them. And so, I ended up continuing to play in the NFL and spent 6 years and have been able to do so many more things because of the platform. People told me that I shouldn't. Teams didn't want to sign me because I was so involved with nonprofit work and was doing things different than had been done before. And it wasn't easy, but at the same time, I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. And it's just such a beautiful dynamic when I run out in the field and specifically the 12 kids that we are legal guardians over, that I represent them and I play for them, and that the resiliency and the perseverance that they experience every single day in their life, I get to go and represent, just as you walked out and represented the entire country. And it's just something that you don't take for granted, and it's something that in that moment, I was made for this. And you just go out there and you just shine, and it's an honor, and at the end of the day, Haiti's a special place, and I hope to be able to take some of you there with me someday.
Thank you for sharing that story. And I hope you guys get your opportunities to do that, whether it's even bigger or even just a smaller part, but play a part. That's all I can say. We have about 5 minutes or less of questions. We have the microphones in the aisleways, so if you would please come forward and go ahead and speak into that microphone and ask your question.
Hey guys, thanks for coming out. When you think of either yourselves or other world-class athletes you've been around that have an elite performance mentality, not just the physical aspect, but can really put it all together, what traits, habits, beliefs, what's behind the scenes with a really high-class performance mindset that you don't see on ESPN that goes into that produces that type of performance?
I can start since I've got this baton. It's very rare in the NFL. I'd love to hear your impression of this, but elite athletes, not all the guys are elite athletes. It's very rare. I would say each team probably has 3, 4, maybe 5. I mean, we're talking a high standard. There are near elites. There are guys who are extremely skillful. There are guys who are football smart, and it kind of keeps them in the fight. Those that have that complete package, they could be an Olympic bobsled gold medalist. They could high jump. They could play baseball. They probably could be good at basketball as well as football. They could be good in a wide variety of sports. They've elected and they've chosen this. They're typically very stubborn in the best of ways. They use little things like David was mentioning of Tim Tebow. To say that's a little bit of it's an unusual behavior, or an unusual mindset. In some ways, if you didn't have that outlet, you'd be concerned with that person, right? But he's used it and he's manifested and put in a direction that's bearing fruit. I think all those guys and gals, again, this is beyond just football, but people who are of an elite quality tend to have not a tendency, but they always take whatever is on their plate and they manufacture it to work for them.
Want to keep going, or do you want another question?
Okay, go ahead, sir.
This is more directed to Stephanie, but it can be answered by everyone. So with team sports, it's very easy to have someone's back or to know that someone else has your back. But with the running, and I myself am a runner too,
sometimes you can get in your own head and like mess yourself up. How, especially during the 100-mile run, how did you fight through that? Like, what was your key things? Did you draw from family, or did you have faith? Like, just what was the key thing that you went to and drew from that? Because, like I said, with running, it's very, very much on yourself, and you can feel like everything's crushing you. So, like, just how did you get through those moments where you were just like maybe getting to your head a little too much?
Yeah, that's a good question. That can be dangerous when you let your mind go without a lot of control when you're out in the middle of nowhere all alone. And I think running can be a solitary sport, and I think a lot of the training that I did was to prepare mentally, and like we were saying, to have the experience of sitting with the pain and sitting with the suffering and just acknowledging, okay, this is not fun. I'm going to keep going, and knowing that those peaks and valleys were going to come during the race. But I would also say that, running for me has really built community. It's showing up at 6 a.m. to do speed work, and I know that I'm going to have a dozen people there with me, and that gets me out of bed in the morning. Or the people throughout the whole, months of training who offered to go on sections of my long runs with me. And those people who, wished me well all throughout the various races. I think it's an inspiration to know that you're part of this community, and thinking about, all those people who put in the hours with you and who contributed in so many different ways. My husband, it was my personal chef throughout the entire training process, which was, unbelievable. Your family makes sacrifices for you to achieve, great things, and I think that's a motivation when your mind starts to wander, and to know, that there are other people who this is meaningful to, and thinking about them. That was a great motivator for me.
Stephanie Wirtz, thank you for being here. Chris Gizzy, welcome home. Thanks for coming back. To David and to Madison, good luck in June. They're getting married. I want to thank you, David Nelson, for your great story as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to all of our speakers this afternoon. On behalf of all the 2017 NCLS participants, the cadet wing, and the faculty and staff of the United States Air Force Academy, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation. Once again, we extend our thanks to our flagship supporter, the Class of 73, the Association of Graduates, the USAFA Endowment, and all others who, through their generosity, made NCLS possible. This concludes this afternoon's session. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.